Hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining me on another episode of the Craft and Thrift podcast. I thought I would record a quick follow-up to last week's episode where I was talking about my sewing day plans, because last week my bestie Victoria was visiting, and one of the plans that we had together was a sewing day, which fit in perfectly with my spring joy list plans, which I think was the blog post from last week. So if you haven't read or listened to these episodes, I'll link them below. But my spring joy list is a list of, I think, 3 things that I want to do just purely for joy, just for fun in the next 3 months. So sort of roughly during spring, because we're in this period in our lives where there's a lot of upheaval going on. There's a lot of renovation work. I'm sort of 6 months into a new job. We're just settling into a new city. Like, it's all exciting. And obviously we're very lucky and privileged to have all these amazing opportunities, but it is also quite stressful and definitely experiencing a lot of overwhelm at the moment. And so I wanted to make some space for joy in the next few months so that it doesn't just become one long slog of sort of eat, sleep, work, strip wallpaper, basically. One of my joy list plans was to set up my sewing machines again, because in our last flat in Edinburgh, I used to have my sewing machines out sort of pretty much permanently. I'm quite lucky that my husband Andrew is quite tolerant of the sewing machines being out, because we had quite a small flat. It was only a 1 bed. So they basically took up the entire sort of lounge/dining room area. But yeah, I used to sew sort of multiple times a week, anywhere from sort of 20 minutes here and there to kind of a couple of hours at a time. And then since we moved into this house, last October, haven't really done any sewing since then, because I just haven't really had the opportunity between sort of moving house and all the sort of unpacking and upheaval that goes with that, and then starting a new job, and then starting renovation work on this house. Done a lot of knitting, because the nice thing about knitting is you can sort of do it in the evening when, you know, you're too tired to do anything else. But yeah, I haven't done any sewing at all. And actually, I realised I use sewing a lot for just kind of useful tasks as well as for joy. So obviously you've got the fun stuff of kind of sewing your own clothes, or I'm working on a wool quilt topper at the moment that I'm going to convert into a dressing gown in time. But yeah, I also realised, having my sewing machines packed away, how much I miss them for just sort of mending and altering clothes. So I had quite a big pile of that stuff piling up. And so having Victoria to stay was the perfect opportunity to just sort of get out all of my sewing stuff, get my sewing machine and my overlocker set up again. I'm lucky enough to have 2 sewing machines, because I inherited one off a relative last year. So we could each have a sewing machine, and then obviously shared the overlocker and the iron. And I just cracked through a pile of mending and altering, which was super satisfying, because it feels now like I've got almost like brand new clothes, even though some of them have been in circulation for a while. So one of the most simple ones that I'm slightly embarrassed that it's taken me literally like more than 6 months to fix was a pair of Morgan jeans that I finished last summer. Really liked the fit of, wore quite a lot, and then annoyingly the jeans button just fell off. And it was particularly annoying because I'd done it on my Hulk press, and I've got one of these sort of green metal utility presses that you use for like jeans buttons and rivets and things like that. And it just ripped through the fabric. So I was pretty certain I would have interfaced the fabric behind, but now I'm wondering if I forgot to. And so yeah, after a few times of wearing, the jeans button just fell off. And I continue to wear them a little bit, slightly embarrassingly, with like a safety pin and a belt, but then set them aside with the intent to fix them. And then we moved house, and then I basically forgot. And then I was thinking the other day about how I wanted to sew myself some more jeans, because I feel a bit short on trousers at the moment. And then was suddenly like, hang on, didn't I finish a pair of jeans last summer? What happened to them? And then dug around and found my mending pile and was like, oh yeah, all I have to do is sew a button back on. So I decided to just hand sew a button back on. I found one in my stash that was a metal gold sort of antique brass looking button with a metal shank. So it sort of emulates the look of a jeans button, but without needing to use the press to apply it, because obviously there's a little hole where the previous button was. So I sewed the hole closed, sewed the button over the hole. Bob's your uncle. Pair of jeans back in circulation. That has taken me an embarrassing long time to do that. So yeah, I'm pretty delighted to have them back. I also this winter have been wearing a thrifted wool coat, originally from Bowden, but I bought it for £10 from a charity shop, so that was a major score. Back in, I'm pretty certain, 2019, because I was working in Glasgow at the time, and I'm sure I bought it from a Glasgow charity shop. So I've had it like 5, coming up 6 years, so it doesn't really owe me anything, and it is starting to look a little bit sad, like the wool is fraying around the cuffs and things like that. So I'm wondering if this might have been its last winter. But it developed a massive hole in one of the pockets, and I was starting to lose things like into the lining. So if I put keys or poo bags into that pocket and then couldn't find them later, it would be because they'd like dropped into the lining of the coat. So luckily, as far as I'm aware, I haven't actually lost anything through that hole, but it was just a bit of a pain to have to like retrieve my house keys from inside the lining of my coat. And again, that was like a 5-minute job to just sort of fold the fabric sort of back in on itself and sew the hole closed. So yeah, delighted to have that one done, because it's another one that it's a coat that I'm still wearing quite a lot of at the moment, because it's still quite cold here in Inverness. So I'll probably get at least another couple of months worth of use out of that one before it gets packed away. And then I'm hoping to sew myself a new winter coat before next winter. So yeah, the Bowden coat might be going to coat heaven in the not too distant future, but it doesn't owe me anything. And I think it would, if I donated it before next winter, I think it would still be in good enough nick that a charity shop could probably sell it. Or if I don't think a charity shop would sell it, I might pop it on Vinted for just like £5 or something, just to basically recycle it and keep it out of the textile recycling for a bit longer. But we'll see, because it is my backup coat in case I don't get around to sewing. I'm planning on making the Modern Sewing Company Darcy coat. I want to make a wearable toile first before I cut into my final fabric, which is a beautiful dead stock navy Harris tweed that I've had in my stash for a couple of years. And I think this might be the year to liberate it, so we'll see. But yeah, pocket fixed in literally 5 minutes. So one of those embarrassingly long periods of time that it takes to do something that literally takes you 5 minutes. And then what else did I do? So I altered a pair of trousers. So I bought a pair of trousers off Vinted. They're originally from Hobbs, and they still had the label on. So for anyone listening, I guess not from the UK, Hobbs it's a high street brand, but it's sort of the upper end of the high street, if that makes sense. They do like good quality, sort of like classics, I guess. It's also where you might go if you were buying like a dress for a special occasion, for example. So I bought a green suit from there to wear to my brother's wedding a couple of years ago. And I really liked how the trousers fit, and I wanted some smart trousers in a more neutral colour, because much as I love the green, it's not terribly neutral. So I went to Vinted and I bought a pair of brand new with the tags on. So they were originally £89. I got them for 40, which was a bit of a bargain. Navy trousers, and they fit me really nicely around the waist and the bum and the hips, which is obviously like the key parts. But they were too long. And a little bit snug around the calves. So it wasn't just a case of taking them up, it was also a case of unpicking the side seams to the knee and then letting them out as much as possible. So I did that on one leg, let them out by 1/4 inch, which basically was like literally up to the line of the overlocking stitches, and they were still a little bit snug, so I let them out 1/4 inch on the other side as well. And if I'm honest, they're probably still a little bit snug. But they're a sort of cotton polyester blend with a little bit of elastane, so I suspect they will bag out a little over time. And they're not like unwearably snug, if that makes sense. They're definitely better, so they've had a total of 1/2 inch on each leg let out around the calf. And I guess in an ideal world, I'd have probably wanted maybe 3/4 or even an inch. But they are designed to be quite slim fitting. So I think the risk is you let them out too far and then you lose that nice sort of taper through the leg. And they were also quite long. And they had this little slit detail in the ankle that initially I was getting myself in a bit of a tingle tangle about how to turn them up and replicate that slit. And then Victoria, who was ever the voice of reason, was like, I just wouldn't bother, like they look fine without it. So I took them out to the knee, let out the calf, sewed up both the seams back down to the ankle, and then I've pressed them to the length that I want them, and then I'm going to hand stitch the seam, the bottom hem, sorry. And I'm not actually at this point cutting any fabric because I think they'll look nice with, obviously the turn up is on the inside, so you can't actually see the turn up. But I think that deep hem will give it just a little bit of weight that will help them hang nicely as well. And it also means if in the future I want them slightly longer, because I've got a sort of ankle grazing length, but if I want them longer in the future, I could potentially let them out by maybe up to an inch. Or if I decide maybe I want them with a cuff, I could add a cuff. So I sort of feel like I'll hand stitch them closed, see what they look like, see how much I wear them in their current sort of length, and then I've got the option to alter them again in the future. But I don't foresee me wearing them on a regular basis because my sort of day-to-day wardrobe is not massively smart. I would say I like to feel put together, but I don't necessarily dress like I'm going to the office, but I wanted to have a sort of smart pair of trousers. I had to go to court recently for a work thing, and I realised at the last minute I didn't really have anything terribly smart to wear, and ended up in a bit of a lather over it. And I just sort of thought, you know what, this is the kind of gap in my wardrobe where I just need to buy or make something. Just need one pair of trousers. I've got a smart shirt, got options for sort of smart sweaters and things like that. It's just the trousers that I didn't really have. I thought this would be a good workhorse addition to my wardrobe where you might only wear them 2 or 3 times a year, but when you need a pair of smart trousers, you really need them, So yeah, I'm glad to have hopefully filled that hole in my wardrobe. And then I also have another hand sewing one, which I actually didn't finish because I was kind of focusing more on using the sewing machine, but I'll do them in front of the TV at some point this week probably, where I have a sweater that I wear just in the house because it's an old sweater of my granddad's, so it doesn't fit me very well, it's quite big, but I sewed elbow patches onto the elbows because the elbow fabric was quite thin, and in one of them I've put it in slightly the wrong place, and the fabric is thinning, and I've actually developed a hole kind of just an inch to the right of the elbow patch. So I basically just need to take the elbow patch off and realign it. So, but those are 2 projects, the finishing of the cuffs on the trousers and the elbow patch, that I will do in front of the TV at some point because that doesn't involve the sewing machine anymore. Got through the sewing machine sections of both of those. And then another sort of alteration project that I did, which was another 5-minute job. So what's quite satisfying about these kind of jobs is they pile up because they're kind of boring. But then when you actually sit down and do them, you can bash through, I bashed through 4 or 5 of these in a couple of hours, which was very satisfying. Was Andrew bought himself a grey sweatshirt, which is his kind of uniform of choice, from Uniqlo, and it annoyingly shrunk in the length of the body and was a little bit too short for him once he'd washed it. So he gave it to me, and if I'm honest, grey isn't a colour I would normally choose to wear. I think it makes me look a bit washed out, at least a light grey, which is what this sweatshirt is. But I thought it's the kind of thing I can wear to the gym. I can wear it when I'm working in the garden. It's a good quality 100% cotton sweatshirt. So my other thought was, if I wear it a lot and I want to sort of upgrade it to a more sort of fashion, in inverted commas, part of my wardrobe, I could always consider over dyeing it. But because Andrew's got multiple grey sweatshirts, the problem is this one goes into the wash, and then when it comes out the wash, it ends up back in his drawers because it looks like all of his other stuff. So I wanted to sew some kind of patch onto the chest so that I knew it was mine. And I had a few different options. I've got a couple of Pusheen patches. Use the grey chubby cartoon cat. And I had a embroidered patch that I bought from an artist on Etsy who was raising funds for Black Lives Matter back in like 2020. Excuse me. And I went for that one in the end. It says Angry Girls Club, and then it's got a picture of an angry girl. And I really liked it. So yeah, I've sewn that one on. It looks really good, I think. So I can definitely see the sweatshirt, especially in the summer, becoming a bit of a sort of mooch around the house type sweatshirt, because I tend to wear wool at the moment when I'm mooching around the house, because obviously it's chilly, especially when the heating's not on. But yeah, I can imagine in the summer months having a 100% cotton sweatshirt would be good. And yeah, I can wear it to like the gym. I've already been wearing it for like garden work. So yeah, and then I also just went through my stash with Victoria, and I always find this quite a helpful process to do maybe once or twice a year anyway, just to remind yourself of what you've got. Especially if, like me, you're a bit of a fabric hoarder. Like, I hate to say it, but I do have 4 large, very useful boxes of fabric. And I have plans for, like, the vast majority of it. So I don't resent giving it house space, because I am a creative person and I like to sew, and I will definitely get through it in time. But equally, I like to be mindful about what I bring into the house and what I'm storing. And I don't want to become one of those people that has so much stash that there's just no way I could get through it in one lifetime, you know. Don't know if you've come across the acronym SABLE, Stash Acquired Beyond Life Expectancy. So yeah, I do try to think of my stash in terms of like roughly how much time would it take me to sew up everything in my stash, just to be cognizant of like, am I hoarding more than I could literally ever get through in one lifetime, sort of thing. And I'm pretty happy with it at the moment. I would like it to be smaller, but I think this is probably as big as I would ever let it get. And I've got, like I say, I've got plans for a lot of it as well. But it was useful to go through it with Victoria, and just sometimes it's good to get that like objective second opinion, isn't it? Because I can go down a bit of a rabbit hole about but this one was given to me by a friend or a family member, or this one's sentimental for whatever reason, which means I have to keep it even if it's not like a style I'll use or a colour I'll wear or whatever. So I didn't de-stash any fabric to sort of vintage or anything like that, or give any away in that way, but I did actually de-stash quite a lot to the textile recycling, which is kind of embarrassing. So I've been saving this old piece of fake fur, which I bought to make a blanket for the sofa in our last flat. And again, it doesn't owe me anything. We had it on that sofa for years. And I took it to pieces when we moved house, because the topper was a piece of wool that was sentimental to Andrew. It came from his granny, who's no longer with us. But the backing was just like a sort of polyester type man-made fibre fake fur that, if I remember rightly, I bought off eBay at the time. And I took it to pieces, washed both pieces and put them in storage. And when the fake fur came out of the box, it smelled quite funky, I'm not going to lie. Even Victoria was like, is that weird smell coming from that piece of fabric? And I was like, oh, I think it is. So I was initially swithering like, oh, Andrew really wanted me to make something with this fabric. I should keep it because he wants something from it. And then I was like, I was going to make my mum's dog a dog coat at some point, because she's an older lady. My mum's dog, not my mum. Sorry, mum, if you're listening. Yeah, Gilby's like 9, I think, and she's a boxer, and she's been through a lot in her little life, bless her. She's had multiple surgeries and whatnot, so she's not aged well. Sorry, Gilbs, if you're listening. So I was going to make her a coat at some point. I was like, I was kind of vaguely keeping this fabric for that purpose, but like, yeah, it was just a bit stinky and gross. And I was like, I could wash it again, but I also don't really like working with that kind of fake fur, because as you cut it, it sheds hair absolutely everywhere, and then the clear up becomes a bit of a pain. So Victoria was like, just get rid of it. And I was like, yeah, yeah, you're totally right. So that went to the fabric recycling. There was some sailcloth that came from my grandparents. My grandparents had an old boat that I have fond childhood memories messing around on, like 30 odd years ago. And they got rid of that boat years ago, but I still had some sailcloth, and I've made various bits for various members of the family from it. So it kind of lives on in that capacity, but I was sort of keeping every little bit because I was like, no, it's sentimental, but it's actually really horrible to sew with because it's like thick plasticky type material. It's obviously like a technical fabric, right? Because it's for sails, it's not for bags or whatever. And my sewing machine doesn't enjoy working with it. I get loads of skipped stitches. It's just a pain in the ass. So that was another one that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to let this go now. So that's gone off. So there's just loads of bits like that I was like, I thought I'd done a good job of sorting through my stash when I was packing up in Edinburgh. And I think for the most part I did. That's when I got rid of most of the actual pieces of fabric that I wasn't going to work with, sent them off to charity and things like that. But I think there were bits like that I was just like a bit down the rabbit hole of trying to make those sort of decisions. It was like anything that was vaguely sentimental, I was like, I'm just going to keep it for now because I'm just not like emotionally able in all the upheaval of selling our flat and moving house to make a sensible decision about this. And now that time has passed, it's definitely time to sort of let all this stuff go. So I filled a big bin bag and then 2 smaller bags of fabric scraps and bits like this to go to the recycling. I dropped them off at the textile recycling bin yesterday on the way to work, so that was extremely satisfying, I'm not going to lie. And there's obviously cleared a bit of space in my boxes. I think ideally I'd like to get my boxes down to 3, and I'm at 3.5 now. I was at 4, so I'm now at 3.5. So I think once I've done a bit of sewing and I've created a bit of space, I think I probably could amalgamate them down into 3 boxes. So yeah, that felt very satisfying. And then the rest of my sewing time, I worked on these 2 bestie bags that I had cut out and started sewing last summer as gifts. And that was, like coming up on 9 months ago. So embarrassing. So I carried on working on them. And I think I'm probably like 1 more sewing session away from having them done. So yeah, I've left the sewing machines out and I'm hoping in the next week or so I'll be able to finish them off and get them posted off to their intended recipients. And then that'll be sort of my like sewing to-do list cleared, which means I'll feel sort of a bit more mentally able to start some more joyful projects for myself, which I think I wrote a blog post about, or I recorded a podcast episode about recently, so I won't get into that, but yeah, it just feels good to sort of clear the decks, doesn't it, and then start afresh. But yeah, so I'll maybe leave it there. I think this is maybe a relatively brief one. Oh, we're already at 20 minutes, so it's not that brief. Sorry, everybody. But I'll leave that there for this week's episode. I just kind of wanted to pop on while it was fresh in my mind and update you all on how I got on last week with my sewing day. And yeah, I'll hopefully have a few photos to pop in the show notes. But yeah, this is your sign. If you've got a similar mending pile or alterations pile, this is your sign from the universe. This is me encouraging you to give it a bash, because honestly, for some of these, I was embarrassed at how quickly I got them done, that I've been sitting on them for like the best part of 9 months. But it is what it is, right? Like, life is busy, time is short. Sometimes these things just drop to the bottom of the to-do list, and I'm not going to make myself feel guilty about that, but it does definitely feel good to have them done for sure. But yeah, whatever you're doing today, wherever you are, I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would love it if you could give it a like or write me a comment about what you're up to mending wise. And I will speak to you next week. All right, bye.